Hey everyone, welcome back to our YouTube channel dedicated to Microsoft Fabric, data engineering and data science topics, and essential part of playing with data and discovering some science embedded into them is data integration. That's why today we have a special guest, Abhishek, who is joining us from Data Integration Data Factory team. Abhishek, thanks for joining us. It's the second time we have you here.
Yeah, thanks, Estera, for having me here. So I enjoy, answering questions from you and also demoing all the new capabilities that we are building, and that gets me excited. Thank you.
Awesome. Can you mention what you are working on? What are the features that you are covering as part of product group at Microsoft?
Sure. So, I work on a few features. So I'm part of the data factory team in Microsoft Fabric. And so, of course, our focus is to build the best data integration solution on earth. And so with Fabric, I think these are, becoming two best things together, making it SaaS and making it easier to use. So I do work on a few features within Data Factory, and one of them happens to be, bringing Apache Airflow as a native item in Fabric so that customers can use it as a serverless offering. So we're going to talk about that today.
Yes, you perfectly reveal what's the topic. The topic is data workflows in Microsoft Fabric. So manage Apache Airflow jobs. Let's start with the intro because we are going to talk about Apache Airflow in the context of a managed service as part of Microsoft Fabric. But can you give us a perspective? What is Apache Airflow? What's the value? Why we should dig into another technology, which is again beautifully integrated in our platform? But what's the value? What's the gain?
Yeah, absolutely. And quick overview of Apache Airflow. So Apache Airflow is powered by Python. And as you know, Python is extremely famous. I mean, it's extremely useful, a great language that data scientists, data engineers love about. So Apache Airflow is powered by Python. And so you write DAGs, Directed Acyclic Graphs, which are basically your Python code, the way of defining a pipeline or a data pipeline. That's what you do with Apache Airflow DAGs. And why it's famous in the community is because, of course, it's Apache product and it's open sourced. So it's very well taken by the community. At the same time, it gives you beautiful monitoring experiences for your DAGs. And it can get extremely complex when you're building complex tags or complex data pipelines, which has a lot of workflows stitched to it and a lot of conditions in it, like on failure, do this, on success, do that. It starts to get more and more complex to monitor such workflows. What if this fails? What's the path of execution and things like that? And so it gives you that beautiful monitoring flow experience there. And then it also helps you, it's code based. So it kind of, you can pretty much do everything what you can do with Python there in terms of orchestrating data workflows. The key factor that influences everyone to use data workflows is its extensibility, especially if you're committed on a platform. You do want to understand what's the support and extensibility of that. So Airflow is extremely extensible. Customers can create their own operators. Operators, I'll explain it in a bit. It's basically functions that you use to do certain actions. So we call that as operators. You can customize executors where you execute, and then you can extend libraries. You can build your own libraries. And I'll show you in this example how we have created a library that can be leveraged by anyone using Airflow. So it's very extensible. It's OSS community driven. So, there's a huge driver behind it. And then you're bringing best of both the worlds together. You're bringing the OSS community and the support, the extensibility into Fabric, and you kind of bind Microsoft support and the OSS support together. You get best of both the worlds.
I love how you nailed that question. At the same time, want to ask, okay, because in the past, the two hearts of Data Factory was data pipelines and data flows Gen 2. Right now, we are getting a third heart. I assume that there are some overlaps with data pipelines, but I would like, what are the key differences when I should use data pipelines, when I should use Airflow?
That's a great question. I was hoping for it. So, quick thing was, before I move on to that question, is the extensibility part, which I wanted to highlight. These are like all the providers that you can find for Airflow. It has a huge community and as well as ability to connect to different data sources and different types. So these are some primary features of Airflow. Now, moving on to Estera's question, which is basically how do we see Airflow fitting in Data Factory and customers not being confused now, right? You have data pipelines, which is very visual, very easy to use for orchestration purposes, for data workflow orchestrations, and it's already available today in Data Factory. And customers can absolutely use that if that meets their requirement because it's visual, easy to author, visual drag and drop. It's certainly, extremely easy and quick to get started. Now, where Apache Airflow comes in is think of it as a pro tool where if you need more extensibility or customizations, right, these are capabilities that you would get inherently in Apache Airflow or the data workflows, especially with the OSS extensibility and the previous slide that I showed, the extensibility that it has and the growth it has due to the OSS contributions. So if you want those capabilities and you want to future proof in terms of extensibility, the customizations, that is when you would use Airflow. Of course, you have to write code in this. You have to use Python. That is also a prerequisite that you would need to have is the skill around writing code to author pipelines. Otherwise, you would use data pipelines, which is visual. So this is how we see customers using data pipelines, choosing between data pipelines and Airflow. Whereas the data flows is basically a visual transformation or low-code transformation tool. And that is independent of Airflow because you can orchestrate a data flows job using Apache Airflow. It's not an orchestration tool, it's a transformation tool, visual one though. And so, this is how this whole ecosystem within Data Factory sits as of now.
Abhishek, thanks. Now it makes sense that for orchestration, monitoring, I will go with Airflow just to simplify. And for data transformations, data pipelines within Data Factory are still allowing me to use more than 100 different components just to build my pipeline, transfer the data, save it in a lakehouse, and take the data from any data source which is supported. I can't wait to see the demo just to connect the dots with the value and how it looks like, especially for the devs who are watching us.
Absolutely. Yeah. Excited to demo. So we introduced this feature during the Build conference this year in May, end of May. And so it's in preview, and you can find the blog. We'll put that in the link in the video. And this is where you can find what Airflow is, what are we creating out of that. We certainly add a lot of capabilities beyond what is already available in Airflow. That kind of adds more value for why you should choose Airflow in Fabric versus you're running your own Airflow. And this blog talks about those, but I would basically run through each one of them. It talks about things like instant Apache Airflow runtime provisioning. It talks about versatile cloud, based IDE that we give you. You can author everything inside Fabric itself. It supports auto scaling. It supports intelligent auto pause of clusters. Helps you save cost. It has enhanced security. It's AAD integrated, of course. So you don't have to pass in basic auth anywhere within Airflow. It supports all the Airflow plugins, and it gives you custom pools, which I'll show you. It gives you more flexibility in terms of if you want a dedicated cluster always running. There are scenarios for Airflow to have that where you want some things to be running all the time, and you can do that via creating a custom pool and keeping that pool always on. So we have those capabilities of customizations as well. So now pretty much let's get started. And this has getting started instructions as well. Since it's in preview, and if you're watching this video after it's GA'd, you don't probably need to do the prerequisites. Since it's in preview at this point of time when we're recording it, you would need to enable this capability at your tenant admin level so that you can try this feature out. So this goes on for any preview feature in Fabric. It's a standard procedure. Admin portal, you need to log into the admin portal. Of course, you need to have the admin privileges. Once you do that, and then you will be able to see data workflows and turn that feature or capability on for your tenant. Once you're done with that, you would now see something of this sort that I see. So I'm on a data workflow workspace here, and I'm going to click on data workflow to create a new data workflow or Apache Airflow project. So let's click on this one and give it a quick name. So let's start with, one, and then create it. Now, what happens under the hood is we are able to provision the cluster instantly. As you see, one of the value prop was that you can get clusters instantly. So now what you see is an IDE where you can actually add DAGs here in the Explorer view. And then you can also see, you can monitor Airflow, you can view the connections in Airflow, all those things. And you see a button here which says stop, which means right now I got a cluster instantly, which is running, and it's going to be auto paused if I'm not going to use it for 20 minutes. So it helps to save a lot of cost, especially in your dev environments. Now I can click on this new button and I can say, a simple hello world code that I will be writing. And then you can see that you can create different kinds of files, because in Airflow, it supports different kinds of files. For example, if you're orchestrating DBT, you might want to write a .sql and a .yaml file. So you can do all those different kinds of files within here using data workflows. Here, I'll just simply set up a hello world program. And it has a very simple code which does an echo hello world, and you can change this to anything, but it's simply showing you the capability of how quickly you can get started with Airflow, a simple Python code which is printing hello world. And then I can click on, these are some of the native experiences which you don't get in Airflow doesn't give you this authoring capability or the ID capability, but this is all integrated in SaaS and Fabric, and hence you have this authoring capability. You can also debug it, like you can click on this run debug, click on save and run, and you can see the status of it. And you can also find, interestingly, the status of these DAGs once it's preparing to run. And once it starts to, queue this run, starts running it, you can see step by step all the state information being passed in this UI. Now you can see it ran the bash operator over here, which printed that. What we have done additionally here to make it more native is your whole authoring experience, troubleshooting experience goes to the next level, because now you can click on these tasks and it'll actually take you to actual Airflow monitoring if you want further details. For example, I can click on this task, it takes me to a new browser, and it actually shows me that specific task. So it gets me inside Airflow and it gets me inside that hello world task, and I can actually see all the output. I can see the log, I can see the XCOM. XCOM is basically the input and output that you pass to a given task. Here, the return value is hello world, and you can see it right here, right? That's the one that we were echoing and printing, right? So the whole point is, this is Airflow UI, this is native Airflow UI, so we get best of both the worlds. We are not cutting off anything that the native Airflow offers. So here's my DAG, which got created here through the IDE in Fabric. I can see all the runs here. I can see all the task information here at the task level, and it's all very well hooked from my authoring surface, which is in Fabric. So this is the key feature that I want to show, that we have built on top of Airflow and integrated Airflow with Fabric more natively, where you can author things in Fabric, and then it's all connected to the Airflow UI and monitoring systems as well. So that was a quick demo of like a Hello World program and how you can quickly get started in seconds with instant cluster provisioning in Microsoft Fabric for Apache Airflow.
I love that you presented the Hello World example as, again, this is a starter. Can you show us something more advanced, some business case, just for those who are watching us and looking for using Airflow for their problems, their challenges?
Absolutely. And so let me combine or start connecting the dots. We talked about extensibility, and let me show you example of extensibility as well, right? So what we are doing now is we are creating custom plugins natively for Airflow that will help us run, example, a notebook or a data pipeline using Airflow Orchestrator. And this plugin that we are writing here is just a plugin which can be used anywhere, and it'll be converted to a public provider which can be used by anyone in the future. It's in process. Probably it'll be a provider by the time you're watching this video. So this is extensibility, where we are extending the capabilities of Airflow to support custom operators, and in this case, Fabric plugin, which we are creating. And this allows you to create or run a Fabric item. Fabric item is, for example, a notebook. Fabric item is, for example, a data flows job, a pipeline, data pipeline. All these items can be executed using this custom plugin operator. So it's an extension. Here's the documentation, which we'll put in the link. And now let's see a more concrete example, more real world example. What people do with Airflow is we are using the same plugin here that we just showed in our documentation here. And we are importing the Fabric runtime operator here so that we can run these Fabric items. And so what this is going to do now is, as you see, it basically has the name ETL with data workflows is basically the instance of the DAG object name that you will see in the monitoring. And then it runs this particular DAG. And then if you see, it basically is using a Mendelian architecture or representing a Mendelian architecture. I wouldn't really say that the code inside the notebook is really what you would expect, but this is more from the data workflow perspective or orchestration perspective. I'm doing a Mendelian architecture where I'm using a Fabric pipeline to load the data into the bronze layer. And then this is where I'm specifying the task ID and I'm specifying the item ID, which is basically the pipeline GUID or the identifier in here. And I have created a connection called Fab Connection ID. Of course, you need authentication while doing so. So we have, as part of the plugin, we have a generic connector, and that will be a Fabric connector in Airflow. And using that, you will be able to orchestrate. We are doing it via SPN at this point in time. And this is running a pipeline. And then we are representing Silver layer, which basically transform the data using Notebook and load it into Silver tables, so from the bronze. And so we have a notebook representing that. And then finally we have transformation in gold layer, and then curating that data so that it can be leveraged by reporting. So we have the third task over here, which basically is running the notebook. And then finally what we are doing is we are using a Power BI dataset refresh, which is now semantic model. So we are refreshing the semantic model so that my reports can be refreshed as well once the whole Mendelian architecture data loading E2E process is done. So it's an interesting tag, and then it sends an email and stuff as well. So it has a few HTML component in here. But now let's have a quick look into how this tag looks like and how you would troubleshoot this tag. So as I showed you that you have this run capability here, you can troubleshoot it like right from here by clicking on the run thing, which is awesome. For example, you click on this and it starts running this particular tag. We'll give it a few seconds before it populates, starts queuing this up, and then it starts populating each of these tasks. So by the way, tasks are smaller functions, unit of work within the DAG. DAG is basically a single pipeline. And then within the single pipeline, you can have multiple tasks. So tasks are smaller items in it. So this is how you can run this and you can monitor this. But let's quickly jump into Airflow UI itself for monitoring from here so that we can monitor this complex task. So when I click on this, this is my ETL with data workflows, and I can click here to quickly first, let's have a graph view to analyze what this is doing. So graph view lets me quickly analyze my code that I had written and the dependencies that I had created in a more graphical manner. It's amazing, especially if you're troubleshooting things, to be able to have a look into this. And you can see the different states, of executions. The green ones, the dark greens ones, as you see, is basically the ones which have executed, especially if you're opening a execution or object of a run, you would actually see these color codes. The greens are success, reds are fail, pink is skipped, and so on. So you would see different status for different runs, which is awesome. And then it automatically keeps getting updated. But for more importance, this is what we were doing. We were ingesting data from a Fabric pipeline. So we are able to orchestrate a Fabric pipeline. And then we are calling a notebook and again a notebook to load into Gold and then updating a semantic model. And if you were to monitor this using Airflow, using this custom plugin that we have created, it's extremely simple. Let me go back to the grid view. These are all my failed runs. These are all my, recently it's actually great because it's actually running well. I can click on any one of these. Let's monitor the pipeline. Click on this green dot here. It shows you the task. And what we have done, and this is the beautiful extensibility of Airflow, is not only it brings everything all together, it gives you extensibility to jump into to monitor further details. For example, pipeline has its own in-depth monitoring, right, which I can use. Notebook has its own notebook level monitoring, which I can use for that particular execution. So it kind of shows you the status here, which is great. But I can click on monitor item run. And when I do so, it actually opens up a new Fabric tab, and it shows me my pipeline run details, and it shows me the status of it. And it's great because you can click on this and you can find much more details. In this case, it was successful. That's great. But then you can find things that you were able to move. I was able to get load about 570 MB of data into my raw data. So you can find the audit trails, you can get into the details, you can see what failed, what not failed, and all from like a single source of truth, which is your orchestration pipeline. And the same thing applies for other tasks. Like for example, for notebook, I can click on monitor item run, and it now jumps into that specific notebook run that happened and what was the error and the exception that you had, and you can troubleshoot those over here. And the same thing applies once again for my semantic models, which I can actually click on here and see monitor Power BI datasets. So it now takes me into my dataset or semantic models, and I can actually check the refresh histories of semantic model on when was it last refreshed, which happens to be the current date. So this is how you can, very much get into the details from Airflow. In this example, we were talking about extensibility of how we extended this to a native operator for Fabric so that you can run Fabric items and be able to monitor those Fabric items all using Apache Airflow. So this was a more real world demo that customers build, like famous pattern Medallion architecture, and then refreshing Power BI dataset refresh reports. This is what you are seeing in this particular tag.
That's phenomenal. Okay, this is embedded, integrated natively into Microsoft Fabric. I want to ask, what was the era pre-Fabric? So now embedded, integrated within our platform. So those who are watching and hearing Airflow for the very first time, I think that the value is clear. For those who are running on-prem or cloud, and usually, and that was like a few years ago in another company, I was working on setting up Airflow on 2 VMs just to make them in a high availability mode. So what was the era in terms of using, setting up, and getting the value out of Airflow before you bring this beautiful feature?
Great question. So we started off building this feature because of the pain points that we heard from customers in terms of creating Airflow and managing the security of Airflow, and then managing updates of Airflow. So there were tons of concerns and problems that customers had, especially running open source tools can be more challenging than running your own proprietary tools, because there's an update, there's security incidents that happens, and then you need to roll out fixes and stuff like that. So there's a lot more challenging than when your code is completely owned by you. So a few things that customers have to go through today if they were not using a managed version of Airflow. There are few managed versions of Airflow every cloud provider offers. But then if you're using your own version of Airflow, the biggest challenge is getting started, setting it up, because Airflow is a runtime that needs distributed compute systems like AKS, or batch to be provisioned so that it can scale out and so on. That's very challenging. Even when you do that, it takes probably 20, 30 minutes to get you started. And so imagine your CI/CDs, imagine your dev environments, imagine hundreds of environments that you create. It just kind of kills a lot of time, making you less productive. So you're spending more time in doing things which probably can be automated or can be done quickly. So I think that getting started is very painful, journey that we heard from customers. That is, I'll switch back to my blog as well, the announcement blog. So that piece, which is instant Apache Airflow runtime provisioning, is one of the key areas that we focused in terms of improving. And even if you pause this cluster and start it again, we strive to bring it down to like a minute or two to get it started. Versus in real world, it might be like if you're doing your own, it might actually be good amount of time, 15, 20 minutes. For example, in ADF, we supported this feature and it took about 20 minutes to provision clusters. And we brought that down to instant. There's huge amount of engineering work that has happened behind this to make this happen this way. Apart from that, IDE was one key piece which was missing. If you standalone, like if you have your own standalone Airflow, you will have to use your own code and you will need to have a mechanism of deploying your code to your clusters. IDE basically makes it super simple to get it started. A few other engineering enhancements that we have done, which is not available in Airflow, is like dynamic auto scaling based on the need, and then intelligent auto pause, because we know that no customer wants to pay for the dev environments 24/7. We heard this from customers, and especially when they create these by themselves, it takes so long that you would let it live forever rather than deleting it and creating a new one the other day. So these were some challenges we heard from customers. So we made sure that we can pause and resume very, very quickly. Integrating with AAD and TriID, as we all know that when we work with customers, customers' concern with using OSS at times is, it's not well integrated into my security and audit systems, right? Entra ID provides you all those capabilities of audit, IP-based allow list and things like that. We live just like an application under Entra ID. So it kind of gives you that additional security layer in case if you want to implement Entra security on top of what you're using. So that's another key capability that gets added. And thanks to Entra team, of course, this capability that we get. And then support for plugins. You saw that in the example how we could extend it to a Fabric plugin so that we can run Fabric items and so on. And then custom pools, which I didn't touch upon, but I would want to touch upon, is at times there are requirements or needs from customers where they would want to keep this cluster running 24 bar 7. And a good example would be your production cluster. You may have 100 dev environments, but you have a single or maybe a few production environments, and you want to make sure that it's 24 bar 7 because there's so many jobs being queued upon it that it needs to keep running all the time. And so this is where you can create custom pools. It gives you flexibility over there. It gives you flexibility over the customizations as well. And you can keep such pools running 24 bar 7 to meet your needs. So you have both the options available, best of both the worlds. You have a serverless offering, which auto shuts down. And then you have a more Airflow like offering that you get today is you can keep it alive if you wish to keep it alive. So that's what custom pool allows you to do.
Fantastic. I want to ask about two more aspects before we'll unpack the topic of pricing, how it's built to use Airflow, manage Airflow. But before, just to have a full view, okay, service managed, integrated within Fabric. Now, what about, because this is about DevOps, like that's my perspective. What about two aspects, integration with Git and then how the CI/CD looks like? But let's start again with a baseline of CI/CD, which is Git integration.
Okay, so that's a great question. So this Airflow is integrated with Git, and I'll show you that in a quick demo. So for example, when I create a new data workflow, which I did here, I do have an option of integrating this with Git. For example, if you click on the settings and go to the file storage, you would see an option called Git Sync. So Git Sync is a great capability that Airflow natively supports. What it does is it uses Git as the source of truth for the code files. And so instead of storing the files locally, it's going to use this Git Sync as the source of truth for the files. So you can choose Git Sync. You can use any kinds of provider. These are the top 4 providers that Airflow supports: GitHub, ADO, GitLab, Bitbucket. So these features comes along with Airflow to our system. So we have integrated that here, that you can put your code anywhere, store it anywhere. If you have an existing code or existing investments in any of these repos where your codes are stored, you can very easily point them, choose the credential type here, and then simply put in the repo in the branch, specify the branch that you would want us to use as a source of truth, and then you click on apply. This gets you started with your existing Git investments that you have in terms of your Airflow DAGs, and then you can get started in seconds. That's the Git integration. And then the same Git integration, the Git Sync feature, can be used for your CI/CD purposes as well. So it kind of extends into CI/CD too, because it gives you the option of providing a branch. So now imagine if you were implementing CI/CD, and if you wanted to have a dev branch like in your repo, which is basically for your developers to kind of do a code check-in into the dev branches and then test it out in your dev environment or a QA environment. And then finally, once it's tested and approved, do a PR into a new branch called release branch. So we have that documentation in our ADF documentation, which we'll be bringing in Fabric as well. So, this is pretty much at a high level. What you're seeing here is you start with your dev Git branch and you check in the code into the dev Git branch, and you now Git sync that with your dev data workflows, right? And then you can test it locally, not locally as in on the cloud. Locally, you can log in and then you can test it in Fabric. And then once you have done all the testing, you can create or do a pull request to create a new branch or merge it to a new branch, which is in this case a release branch. And you can have another data workflow, which is Git synced with the release branch of the same repo. So this way you are able to iteratively develop, work on your dev code, test it in dev data workflow. And then once you have tested it, validated it, and then the moment you do a PR into your release branch, the release data workflows picks up, all the changes from there. And then this is how your CI/CD story works with your DAGs.
That's super complex. And I see that again, we addressed all the main pillars. Now, there is no reason to fight a battle with VMs, with infrastructure as a service, and set up Airflow when we have that embedded, simplified. One aspect that I believe lots of our customers will dig into is the pricing. Because again, the move of still using VMs or Kubernetes cluster is pricing. And can you brief us how to calculate the pricing for managed Airflow in Fabric, or how the pricing look like? Oh, I see that you have slides. Fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know we can't go without pricing, but you saw all the value that you get: instant cluster provisioning, all the security features, and then the features that we talked about, like smartness in terms of shutting down the clusters when not in use, and so on. With all those things, this is how the pricing looks like. So we have two different kinds of pools based on the workloads. Like if it's a small or a dev, you would use small pool type. If you have something which is in production or heavy workloads or orchestration that you're doing, you would use large. And so the prices, looks like this is in terms of the CUs. CUs, as you know, Fabric billing happens in terms of the CU units. So this is basically those unit costs and not the dollar values. But you can translate this to dollar values based on the region that you are in. So typically for 1 hour of executions, this is hourly rate, of course. So for every hour, you would pay 5 CU. In case of large, you'll be billed about 10 CU. So it's double because it's double the compute that you get over there. And then if you choose to enable features like auto scale or add additional nodes, in the initial pool that you create, you get 3 nodes because we have to support high availability. So you already get multiple nodes over there. But in cases where you're running, let's say, 100 DAGs concurrently, and you need more, scale out to happen, and that is where you can use additional node, and that you can use by enabling auto scale and setting a max condition over there. And so once you do that, these additional nodes that gets added is much lower fraction of the pool cost. And of course that makes sense because orchestration of the pool is what we are doing when you're creating a pool, but adding a node is a lightweight thing. So it's much more valuable. In fact, it gives you much more value back when you're running larger nodes, larger in the sense scaling out your nodes, because that's where your CU charges are actually more lower. You're paying about 0.6 CU and 1.3 CU for small and large respectively, for every additional nodes that you add. So especially when you enable auto scale, your pricing wouldn't just get multiplied from the base rate. It just adds a little bit more for each node that gets added on, and hence makes it more valuable for customers to use it.
Abhishek, thanks a lot for this conversation, for this session. As the Apache Airflow jobs in Microsoft Fabric right now, workflows are super complex. It looks that's super well addressed. I want to ask you, what's the future? What's the next steps that you are planning for this functionality?
Yep. So we are looking for customer feedback. We're more than happy to hear more customer feedback. We have a few work items, especially focused more on network security, like making sure that just like Spark, data workflows supports managed VNet as well, so that you can connect to data sources behind private endpoints. So those are a few things that we are working on. And of course, by GA, general availability, we'll have those capabilities in as well.
Plus workspace identity.
Workspace identity, that's one work item we are working on. But yes, I do understand that we need easier mechanism for customers so that they don't have to recreate connections. And so workspace managed identity or user assigned managed identity should be something which can be used by customers for easily connecting to different data sources. That's on our radar as well.
Fantastic. So for those who are watching us, again, you got the tutorial end-to-end fully packaged with the story directly from the product group that created that functionality, data workflows in Microsoft Fabric. Abhishek, one more point. So the demo you presented are super inspiring. For those who want to start and try using Apache Airflow jobs, what would you recommend for them?
Yeah, so we have all the tutorials that you saw today. We have put those as tutorials under documentation. We'll put the link here so that you can get started, whichever complexity you want to start with. Hello world, or you want to run an ADF pipeline, or you want to run a Databricks job, or you want to run Fabric item like notebooks. We have documented all of them, including DBTs, right? So we have full-fledged tutorials that you can use to accomplish the things that you want.
Fantastic. Awesome. So thanks a lot for joining us for the second time. For those who are watching us, remember to leave the like button, leave a comment, leave a feedback, reach out to us directly with suggestion for the next episodes. What would you like to see? And also leave the feedback about manage Apache Airflow jobs in Microsoft Fabric. As Abhishek mentioned, we are looking to get your feedback. As well, remember about one website, ideas.fabric.microsoft.com, which we monitor on a daily basis. If you have any idea, if you have any feature request that you would like to get implemented and get Fabric improved, please leave that idea there. So until the next time, happy exploring and using managed Apache Airflow jobs in Fabric, and see you again soon. Thanks.